I think all of us are deeply in his debt, and I have to say to thank Professor Cutler as well for their leadership in this effort, and the Heidemans and March of the Living and everybody else who made this possible. But Alan has been a courageous voice, and we don't get to say it often enough, but standing up when it isn't convenient and not comfortable on television and other places, defending Israel in the right way, with the right words, and we're really indebted for all that you have done, and it's my pleasure to present to you Professor Dershowitz.
Thank you. After listening to Ron Persora's wonderful speech, and he's absolutely right, sarcasm and humor is the only way to deal with this, it sounded very familiar to me. And I'm not at the UN. I'm in academia. And that is the other institution that in many ways is comparable to the United Nations in the manner by which it manages to invert good to bad, bad to good, rights to wrongs. One of the things we learned at today's conference, and we must never forget, is that central to the Holocaust were students, young people, professors, and other professionals. They provided the academic and intellectual basis for the worst evil in the history of the world. Now, I've been in academia for 60 years, and I have to tell you, I know academia. I know professors. I know students. And there are no group of people that have a greater ability to invert and to justify anything by the use of magical thinking and magical words. Now, I have to say, great stuff gets done in academic institutions. This institution provides enormous research. My university, Harvard, has contributed an enormous amount to the world. I'm privileged to have honorary degrees from several Israeli and other universities that have contributed a great deal. So I don't want to paint with a broad brush. On balance, academia has contributed an enormous amount. But the fact that a person is a professor, or the fact that a person is a young student, should not exculpate them from responsibility for bigotry. Young people make as many mistakes and are as bigoted as old people. Youth is not a prescription for correctness. When I hear people say, I'm young, yeah, that's a two-edged sword. You're young, and that cuts both ways. One thing, it means you're going to be in positions of responsibility for a long, long, long time. And so you better be right about what you're saying. And it's remarkable to me how much falsity is presented on university campuses. Now, I think it's only by a minority of professors and students. It's a very vocal minority, but it is a minority. If you look at European campuses, you look at American campuses, the loudest voices are the voices of bigotry, the voices of inversion, the voices which present wrongs as rights. American, European, and here I'm going to say something that will surprise you, American, European, and Israeli academics are at the forefront of the new anti-Semitism disguised as anti-Zionism. That is a serious accusation, and I mean to back it up. I have to tell you, it's an accusation that gets you into a lot of trouble. About 5 years ago, I got an honorary doctorate at Tel Aviv University, and I was honored by being asked to make a speech on behalf of the people receiving the honorary doctorate. And I divided my speech in half. The first half of my speech was in defense of the right of Israeli academics to spew forth the anti-Zionism and the bigotry that one hears at Ben Gurion University, at Tel Aviv University, at Haifa University, at Hebrew University, at virtually every university. The first half of my speech was devoted to defending the rights of those people, because there were people on the extreme right that wanted to ban them, it wanted to deny them tenure, to deny them academic positions. And I made a strong defense of their right to speak. The second half of my speech was a rebuttal to what they were saying, a condemnation of what they were spewing. And Haaretz had a big editorial accusing me of McCarthyism. McCarthyism because I dared to criticize academics while defending their rights. So it is a hard balance to strike. One does not want to in any way deny foolish people and bigots the right to express their views. One can talk about whether they have the right to express their views to captive audiences in a classroom of students they will be grading and recommending and evaluating, but certainly they have a right to express their views outside of the classroom. And the views they are expressing are the views that we're talking about at this conference. Inversion. It is a common statement on college and university campuses today, from Oxford to Cambridge to other universities in England, to the University of Paris, to the Sorbonne, to Harvard, to Yale, to Princeton, you name it, that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is equivalent to what the Nazis did to the Jews. That is acceptable rhetoric on university campuses today. If you want to say maybe that isn't completely acceptable, certainly the apartheid analogy is acceptable. I fought for years against apartheid. Erwin Kotler and I helped to represent Nelson Mandela. We tried to arrange a spy trade with him, the one that ultimately resulted in the release of Natan Sharansky, and we worked with the ANC. The ANC refused to include, and rightfully so, Mandela. We understand what apartheid is. I edited the first law review article in 1960 on the legal structure of apartheid. I was banned from speaking in South Africa because of my editing of that article. I know what apartheid is. And to analogize Israel at its worst with apartheid is to diminish the suffering of Africans, of black Africans, under apartheid, just as equating Israel to Nazism is, as I said before, to say there were no gas chambers, there were no killing of children, there was no ingathering. It's all a myth, because obviously Israel is not doing that to the Palestinians. Today on college campus, Zionism is equated with hate speech. That is, you have university campuses that have platforms against Zionism. It started in England with Leeds University, which 15 years ago, after the resolution by the General Assembly equating Zionism with racism, banned Zionist speakers on the ground that Zionism was a form of racism and Zionist speech was hate speech. The claim that Israel is the worst human rights offender is something one hears on university campuses from the mouths of tenured professors. The BDS movement being subjected only to Israel is being subjected to the BDS movement. What does that convey to college students and college professors? That only one country in the world should be subject to this capital punishment of economic, cultural, and academic sanction. Jews are regarded on college campus today as a privileged group, not entitled to the safe spaces that other students are entitled to. Let me tell you, being a Jewish Zionist on a university campus in Europe, in the United States today, is not a privilege. It is a responsibility, and it is one that is borne heavily on the shoulders of many, many of the young men and women. And then this new concept of intersectionality, which is a phony sociological concept constructed by the hard left to exclude Jews from being protected and exclude Israel from being included among anybody who deserves to be protected. The theory of intersectionality is there are oppressors and there are the oppressed. And all of the oppressors have to join in legion. So if you're a black person who's been discriminated against in Ferguson, you must stand together with Palestinians in Hamas and in the Gaza. And you cannot be a true gay activist if you're not prepared to support rockets being sent from Gaza to Israel and human shields being used. If you don't believe in that, you can't be a true gay activist. After all, gay activists tried to get together in Chicago earlier this year with gay activists from Israel and gay activists from around the world, and that was disrupted by an organization called Black Lives Matter. Now, Black Lives Matter, and I support that, goals of that organization. But today, many within Black Lives Matter believe that you can't say Black Lives Matter unless you say Palestinian lives matter more than Jewish lives. Jewish lives can't matter. If you say that, you're engaging in a kind of equivalency, which connotes a kind of racism. And so intersectionality today says that the Jewish nation and its supporters are primary among the oppressors of women, of gays, of people of color, of immigrants, of the poor, of the victims of colonialism. Jews are therefore undeserving of safe spaces, undeserving of the right to speak. It is a right today on college campuses to disrupt pro-Israel speakers. Whether the pro-Israel speaker be Moshe Halbertal, who's a strong advocate for peace and a two-state solution, whose speech was not allowed to go forward, or other pro-peace, Tzipi Livni at Harvard University is accused of smelling bad, and Jewish students who believe in intersectionality come to the defense of the bigot and the racist who use that trope of smelly Jews at Harvard. Now, the school condemned that, of course, and it should condemn that. And when people go too far, condemnations are to be heard. But the right to speak, even the right to be treated respectfully, that is today a right that has come into question. And radical leftists have talked about respectability as a class-based privilege. And therefore, Jewish students and Zionists have no right to be treated with respect. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like something that could come out of a German university in the 1930s? Now, all analogies are imperfect, and I'm not here suggesting that what is going on American university campuses is equivalent to what's going on and what went on in Germany. But I am saying that the roots of hatred grow deep in academia. And let me tell you who really are culpable as well, and that is pro-Israel Jewish professors on university campuses who don't have the courage to speak out and express what they believe to be true. Now, there are some who do speak out, but on every college and university campus that I visit, and I visit 100 a year, on every university campus, I am told about pro-Israel professors who go to the synagogue and talk about Israel, who go to Hillel to talk about Israel, but will not make a public statement either supporting Israel or condemning those who express hate. I'm not talking about supporting all of Israel's points of views. Many of you know my views. I'm very much a dissenter in terms of current Israeli policy. Since 1973, I've been a strong opponent of Israeli settlement policy. I'm a strong opponent of many of what things that Israel does. If I were an Israeli, I'd be active in civil liberties and civil rights and critical of the Israeli government. I'm not talking about that. Criticism of Israel is fair, it's good. I'm talking about demonization of Israel, delegitimation of Israel, applying this triple and double standard to Israel. And what one hears today are the loud voices of hate on college campuses, maybe only 10 or 20%. But the 30 or 40% who believe that the 10 or 20% are wrong don't have the courage of their convictions. They are afraid they will become less popular with students, and they will. They are afraid that their student evaluations will go down, and they will. They're afraid that they'll be kept out of honor societies, and they will. And young ones are afraid that they won't get tenure, and all of that is true. All of that is true. But courage requires standing up to this kind of bigotry. It was Heinrich Heine who said, and was later quoted by Robert Jackson at Nuremberg, that those who start by burning books end by burning people. We haven't yet seen the burning of books on university campuses, but we have been seeing over the past few years the suppression of free speech. We have seen the stopping of speakers. We have seen this double standard. We've seen the acceptance of inversion. We've seen the acceptance of intersectionality. So I am here today to point the finger of accusation at academia and at students, and to say that deserves a high place on the agenda of combating hate and combating the kind of bigotry that can lead to actions that are much worse. I am here in the presence of this great university to say that being a professor, being a student, being an academic does not immunize you from legitimate criticism for the substance of your views. Thank you very much.